comparison of the two editions, digital editions of the Vachaspatyam Sanskrit Dictionary. One of them is the Tirupati Edition, and one of them is of circa 2004, and the other is the Cologne Edition of 2013. The two files that are started with look like this: the vcpte Tirupati Edition original. It has the Sanskrit encoded in the WX encoding. It indicates head words by angle bracket, head word, angle bracket, and then the end of the head word by angle bracket slash head word, angle bracket. The Cologne Edition indicates head words by the form angle bracket, hi, angle bracket, curly, at, head word, at, curly bracket, broken bar. Both are approximately in order of the text of the Vachaspatyam. The Cologne Edition has each line separately coded on a separate line of the file, whereas the Tirupati Edition aggregates lines in certain ways. Now, it's necessary to get these in a comparable encoding to be able to do comparisons readily. So that's the purpose of these two files, which both have the Sanskrit encoded in SLP1 transliteration, as opposed to the original WX or Harvard Kyoto encoding that was started with. Also, a few corrections are made in the markup indicating head words for the Tirupati Edition. About 200 or 300 head words were changed in various ways. For example, at line 19809 of the original file, the ending head word is not appropriately coded, and in the modification that we're going to be working with, that has been corrected, and there's 200 or 300 corrections of that nature. So anyway, we've got comparably encoded and transliterated versions of both dictionaries, both versions of the Vachaspatyam. The next step is to create a list of all the head words and the line ranges in the file of those head words. That's what these two files, vcpte headword1.txt and vcp headword1.txt, do. So, for example, for the very first head word, it starts in the Tirupati Edition. It starts on line 2, and it ends on this blank line 9. That's included, as well as the head word ending code on line 8. For the Cologne Edition, there's actually two head words spelled the same that are right after each other, and the first one starts on line 2 and it goes through line 7, and the second one starts at line 8 and it goes through line 36, and then on line 37 the next head word starts Arinen. Now we can see that just by looking at looking at the last word in each of these, you can see that they're spelled slightly differently. One of them is wrong, probably. The text is difficult to read, but we're not trying to solve that now, but they correspond. You can see they correspond. Now, a program was written to just correspond these two files of head words with line ranges. And it appears that all we have to do is, here's the result of that program, this hw_comp7.txt. It says that the first head word going under head word name A and going comprising lines 2 through 9 inclusive of the Vachaspatyam Tirupati Edition correspond to the first two head words, both spelled A, of the Cologne Edition. So that's nice. So we got that correspondence. Then there's the next one in the Tirupati Edition corresponds to the next available one in the Cologne Edition, and everything looks just terrific. But there's actually a lot of complications that come in when the comparison is followed through all the way through the 40 some odd thousand head words in these two files. And this file here, the comp7 force.txt, has a lot of forced correspondences that are irregular, you might say. For example, the first one here is Agnira Uvacha is also part of the correspondence to Agni. Now, if you look at Agni, so Agni starts at line 970 of the Tirupati Edition. We'll go through this in some detail because it's interesting, and it goes down through line 990. It starts at line 1038 of the Cologne Edition, and you can see us by comparing text. It's you can see we're talking about the same text, so that's good. But now let's go to line 1205, which is the end of the head word identified as Agni here. Now here we see it ends at Taduktam Parate. Now let's see if we can find Parate. Oh, I got, let me get back oriented properly. We'll see that in the Tirupati Edition, we have to go down here to line 979 before we get that Taduktam Parate. And then it begins with Angira Uvacha. And that's what the Cologne Edition interpreted as a head word, and then we see Kuru Punyam Prajasargam, Kuru Punyam Prajasargam. So these lines correspond, even though the head words are spelled differently. If we go to the end of the Tirupati Edition and the end of the Cologne Edition, we see that Tachchab Davasare Darshayishyante, and it's not spelled quite the same, but it's definitely the same text. There's differences in spelling. No attempt is being made to say which is right at this stage. Probably, at any rate, we've now convinced ourselves that this correspondence is right, and there's no way we could have guessed at except by just looking at the underlying text. So that's what was done. And the way it was done, just if you're curious, you could start out with an empty force file, force empty, and run the same thing. And what the program is written to do is when it discovers problems, it and finds 5 of them, it stops and writes out information. And we can see that we got Agni 970 to 990 corresponding to Agni 1038 1205. We're good all the way up through there. But then we get some incomparable, those two aren't the same. Those same headwords at all, so there's some problems. So you go and look at the text and you figure that the way to solve the problem is by declaring a forced equality between certain headword records. So that's the basic idea of what was done. One thing that simplified life a bit was to make use of the fuzzy matching of strings. So, for example, this ansha sa varnana is said to be identified approximately tilde equals to the same spelling but with 2 retroflex ends, or represented in SLP1 by capital R. And that was done by the Levenstein fuzzy matching process. If the editing distance between the 2 words was less than 4, then they were said to be approximately equal. And now there are a few other kinds of differences where there were headwords that only appeared in the one file or the other. Like here's one, anukarya. Apparently just doesn't appear in the Tirupati Edition. There's also 40 or 50 words in the Tirupati Edition where for some reason the headword variants are repeated as separate headwords, and those are not done in the Cologne Edition. So there's that kind of situation also. So all in all, there's about 940 at the moment forced comparisons of one kind or another. And when all of those are applied, then the 2 files of headwords are made to correspond. And that should be useful in cross-using the 2 dictionaries. So that's the end of this. This material will be put on GitHub as soon as I can do it.